So you're telling me that we're gonna see Ghostface in the snow? How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champane and welcome to my channel. I'll give you a little mask update here. I switched out the Mandalorian helmet for the aged Ghostface mask, which I got from Halloween Asylum. I've been trying to get this thing since Scream 6 came out and it was really tough to get, but they had it and they shipped it within like 2 days. So great service there. It's a great website. I highly recommend it. So for today's video, I'm doing something new where I take all of the big horror news from throughout the week and combine it into one big video. So yeah, let's start out with Chucky season 3. So we just got the first sort of teaser for this new season of Chucky, and while it only reveals a little bit of info on what the season's going to be about, there's actually a lot of interesting stuff to talk about here. So back when this writer's strike started in Hollywood, it turns out that Chucky was in the middle of filming its 3rd season. They were only done with around 4 of the 8 episodes that we would expect from this show, and it wasn't clear if they were going to be able to finish it by October, which is usually when this show premieres. Like at this point, I'd say it's a Halloween staple. So while we don't know how or even if they were able to finish filming this season, it is going to premiere on October 4th on 3 networks this time instead of 2. So seasons 1 and 2 premiered on USA and Syfy, and you had to watch them week to week, and then later on the whole season was added to Peacock. This time around, you're going to be able to watch it next day on Peacock after it airs on USA and Syfy, which is great. It's a great change because I feel like that was a big reason why this show got good ratings instead of amazing ratings. At this point, who even has cable anymore? It's just so much more convenient when you can watch the show on your own time the next day, and I'm glad that Universal or NBC or whatever the parent company of this show is caught on to what people actually want, and they're going to be releasing it the next day after it airs. Now, like I mentioned, we don't know if they were able to finish filming this show. It could totally be aired Walking Dead style, where we get the first 4 episodes and then there's a mid-season finale with a break, and then it comes back in 2025. That's probably the worst option for a show like this. As much as I love Chucky, I think the first season is absolutely phenomenal. The second season I wasn't so big on, but I'm still big enough on the show where I want to see the 3rd season because of how the 2nd season ends. A character I really don't like is shipped off to London, so yeah, you know, I don't think we have to worry about that character coming back in season 3. But yeah, I don't think the story in the show is strong enough to retain people if there is a mid-season break, so what I really hope happened is they were able to figure out how to film the rest of it without breaking any rules or guidelines or whatever is going on with SAG and the Writers Guild. I don't keep up with the strike and anything like that, so I don't really know a lot about it. I just hope that there was a way that appeases both sides of the situation where they're able to finish filming this show, because Halloween and Chucky go hand in hand at this point, and while this October is extremely busy for me, the last few have been extremely busy for me, and I've always been able to find time to watch this show, and I was actually worried that I wouldn't be able to do that this year, so I'm just like relieved and glad that I'm going to be able to watch it, even though, you know, just generally speaking, this is a very busy October for me between games, shows, movies, and my wedding. Most importantly, my wedding. I saved that for last on purpose. Also, if you didn't keep up with season 2 as it was airing, they are going to make it available on Peacock September 4th. That's kind of a really long wait. That's almost a year wait after the show ended, which basically means there's like a 2-year gap between Chucky season 1 and 2 if you want to watch it on Peacock and didn't keep up with it week to week. I'm just so like relieved and glad they were able to figure out this situation, because I feel like that was the biggest roadblock in terms of this show really getting out there. I think it does really well. I think it could just do even better if it was more easily accessible to more people. Now, interestingly, it was revealed that this season is going to take place in Washington, D.C. instead of New York City. They were kind of building up to it taking place in New York City at the end of season 2, so I'm actually a little bit disappointed about that. I think D.C. is a cool spot though, and it's nice to see the series bouncing around between Hackensack, New Jersey, New York City, and now Washington, D.C. I think it's cool. Obviously, it's hard to speculate when we haven't seen anything. The teaser itself is fine. It definitely plays more into the comedy than the horror. I mean, it's Chucky giving a press conference to a bunch of reporters as if he's running for some sort of political office. Now, that is like straight comedy. There's no horror there at all. In fact, like the only horror that's in the trailer is when a reporter asks if it's a movie or a TV show, and Chucky jumps off the podium and goes to kill them. It all happens off screen, of course, but yeah, that's like the only horror in the trailer. I really hope this season leans more heavily into the horror like the first season did, because I feel like the first season was more like Bride of Chucky, and then the second season was more like Seed of Chucky, and I definitely think they nailed the horror comedy vibe in Bride of Chucky. Around here where I live, there used to be a movie theater at the mall called Macomb Mall, and the movie theater shut down, but they had a Bride of Chucky poster for the longest time, and the Spencer's Gifts had a life-size Chucky that was all stitched up like in Bride of Chucky. That doll used to scare the shit out of me when I was a kid, so yeah, I hope this season kind of goes more towards that vibe than what we saw in season 2 and what we saw in Seed of Chucky and Cult of Chucky. I don't like the straight comedy for this character. I think he can be scary if he's used effectively. But yeah, the show is premiering October 4th. I'm excited about that. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Next up here, let's talk about the Toxic Avenger remake. This one is starring Peter Dinklage as Toxie, and at first it seemed like it was going to follow in the footsteps of the original movie and just kind of be like a bigger-ish budget version of it, but now it's really clear that they're just doing their own thing with the character of Toxie, which is fine. I feel like there is a hardcore fan base out there for the original movie, but it's kind of one of those movies for me and my friends that you put on when people are over, so you can glance over at it knowing that something crazy is going to be happening on screen at any given time. And it's legitimately charming. I would say, if you ask my fiance who does not like horror, she would tell you it's probably the worst movie I've ever showed her, but she just doesn't get it. She'll come around eventually. Anyway, all we have to go on from this movie is a couple interviews and now a new screenshot of Toxie, which he does look pretty cool. He's really obscured, right? He's covered in shadow, but there is a fluorescent green mop, which I think is a cool weapon. We have also heard that this is going to be kind of in the vein of Deadpool, where it's going to be a violent comedy that's kind of like troping or making fun of superhero movies, which to me, it's a little too late for that, but I'm still excited for this, I would say, just to see what it is. And I like the idea of it being a road trip film. It is just kind of funny that Deadpool 3 is going to be a road trip film where Deadpool and Wolverine are kind of going through the multiverse, and it seems like that's sort of what they're doing here, minus the multiverse. I don't know. Anyway, it's premiering September 21st at Fantastic Fest alongside VHS 85, so we'll know if it's good or not from those screenings, I would say. Unfortunately, Legendary hasn't given an actual release date for us normal people who don't go to film festivals, so yeah, I'm curious about this movie. I wouldn't say I'm exactly excited, but I do want to check it out when it is released. All right, next up here, let's talk about this big Scream 7 news that came out this week. So Christopher Landon is taking over for Radio Silence, directing this one. That's old news at this point. I'm kind of excited for that. I like Christopher Landon's stuff a lot. I like Happy Death Day. Happy Death Day to You is, I think, his best movie. I also thought Freaky was really good, and if you haven't seen Freaky, just watch it or look up the intro on YouTube and you'll kind of see why I think he'd do a great job with a violent slasher like Scream 7. I just didn't really like his new movie We Have a Ghost, but you know, nobody's perfect, right? The newest update we got is coming from Production Weekly, and they're giving us a ton of info here. So the working title for Scream 7 is Blackbird, and the working title is just what they call it while they're filming it. Halloween Kills was called Mob Rules because, you know, a huge plot point was the mob of Haddonfield going after Michael, and Halloween Ends was called Cave Dweller because Michael Myers lived in a cave. So they usually do line up with what the movie is going to be about. And someone on Twitter pointed out that in a lot of folklore, a blackbird is able to resurrect people from the dead. So obviously all the Stu Macher fans out there are like, oh my God, they're finally going to do it. They're going to make Stu a killer in this movie. I am not convinced. I've read the Scream 6 script and they refer to the TV that gets dropped on one of the killers that I'm not remembering right now, but they say that it's the TV that killed Stu. And there are just a bunch of references to Stu being dead in Scream 6. I'm not totally sold on the idea yet. And so far, like with the last two Scream movies, the working titles have been pretty literal. Like I think Scream 6's was Blackmore because the core 4 goes to Blackmore University. So I think the Blackbird title could be a lot more literal than people are thinking. We also found that it's going to film sometime between January 1st and April 19th in Montreal next year. And that's cool because Montreal was used as a stand-in for New York City in Scream 6. And it tricked me. I think if you go back to my review, I was like, I don't know if they filmed it in New York City, but it did a good enough job for me. I later found out that it was filmed in Montreal, and they did an incredible job converting that over to New York City. So I think if they're going to use that and stick with the New York City theme, that's great. It was just a great change of scenery after having so many of the movies set in California. And even though I don't think it filmed around Halloween, having the movie set around Halloween was super cool. And the interesting thing here is that since they're filming in Canada, it's going to probably be snowing while they're filming. So like I said on Twitter the other day when I was talking about this update as it happened, we might see Ghostface paint the snow red, which is awesome. I've talked about in the past how I don't really love the idea of taking someone like Jason or Michael Myers and putting them in a snowy setting because they're both of them have seasons that are so integral to their character, right? A lot of the Friday the 13th movies take place at a summer camp, so that means summer to me, and Halloween is called Halloween, so it should just take place around Halloween. But the Scream franchise is mostly taking place in California. The only thing really tying it into Halloween, other than the fact that Scream 6 took place around Halloween in New York, is the whole thing where the Ghostface getup is a Halloween costume. So yeah, I feel like if they're gonna film in the first quarter, we'll get to see some snow, which is cool. And then they plan on releasing the movie around the fall, which I also think is great, right? Like releasing this movie in October instead of January, that's flawless for me. I've just been really let down by a lot of horror movies this year, especially ones like Cobweb that look like they should be releasing around Halloween, releasing in the middle of the summer. In January, it's not the middle of the summer, but still, I want Scream to release around Halloween because that's when I get excited to watch those movies. Like I was just editing a video the other day and I wanted to put Scream 6 on, and I was like, I definitely ordered a steelbook of that a long time ago and never got it. So I went up to Best Buy and showed them my receipt, and they gave me one. So I watched it and it was great because we're leading into Halloween. So I think this production schedule of filming in the first half of 2024 and releasing around October, A+ move on Paramount and Spyglass's part. The aspect of this movie that's really determining my hype is whether or not Sydney is going to be back. From everything we've heard, it looks like she is going to be featured in this movie, and it's weird because before Scream 6 came out, I was like nervous that she wasn't going to be in it, but now that I've seen it, I want Sam to just be the main character, and I want this movie to focus on the core four. I'm just over legacy characters at this point. I don't really feel like Sid had a reason to be there in Scream 5, and she really kind of took Sam's moment, I think, in the third act. That was a big reason why that movie didn't totally work for me, and even though they had to rewrite a lot of the script to take her out of Scream 6, it still ended up as a pretty good movie in my opinion, at least. So yeah, if she is back, I'll still go see it. I'll still be excited for it, but I kind of hope they focus on the core four because they earned it in Scream 6. But yeah, that's the update on Scream 7. So let's talk about this new lawsuit that just dropped today, which I know as horror fans were like, oh no, a new lawsuit. But this one I think is like a good one. I don't know. Can you really ever have a good lawsuit? I'll just tell you what it is. So between the Nun 2 coming out next month and The Flash bombing completely, I don't think there's a worse time for this news to come out for Warner Brothers, but Bonnie Aarons, the lady who's played Valak the Nun in The Conjuring 2 and in the first Nun movie, and of course the upcoming Nun 2, she is suing them because allegedly they owe her a lot of money for this movie based on merchandising and how well the Nun did in theaters. Because if you didn't know, out of all the Conjuring movies, the one that made the most money is the Nun. It beat out The Conjuring 2 by I think like 20 or 30 million dollars, which is crazy considering it was just a spinoff. That just goes to show how popular the character of the Nun is. And what she's saying is she made $71,000 for her part in The Conjuring 2, and that after that she was supposed to get more money based on how well the movie did and also merchandise sales, and that character does drive quite a bit of merchandise. Like, I'm a huge Conjuring franchise fan, and the only piece of merchandise I have from that entire franchise is one of those living dead dolls of Valak. And I'm pretty biased here because I've met Bonnie a few times and she's like a completely amazing person. I interviewed her on the set of The Nun. I met her at a couple Halloween parties after Jacob's Wife came out, I think is what the movie was called, where she played a vampire, and it was awesome. She's a great person to talk to, and I totally agree with what she's saying here, where her likeness is a huge part of why The Nun is successful. And there are interviews before either movie came out, like The Conjuring 2 or The Nun, where people involved were like, yeah, she brought a lot to the character with the shape of her face. So they basically admitted that she's important to this character, and they have made quite a bit of money off of her. And we see this all the time as horror fans, where the people who play the reason we're at the theater, you know, the people behind Leatherface, the people behind Michael, Jason, they are the ones who don't get paid enough money. And it's the people that I personally, at least, don't really care as much about, like Laurie Strode, for example. I think she's great. I think she's a super important character to the Halloween franchise. But if you say the word Halloween 1978, I'm not thinking of Laurie Strode. I'm thinking of Michael Myers. So it seems a little bit backwards how these people are getting nickel and dimed, whereas the leads and final girls are getting massive payouts. I think it should be a little more even. And I'm glad that this lawsuit is happening. It seems like they decisively timed it to happen when they need it to wrap up very quickly, right? Like, all they have to do is settle this outside of court, say, hey, you're right, these line items we took out of the list of merch sales, that was wrong of us, here's your money, now go promote The Nun 2. So yeah, I'm still excited for The Nun 2. I feel like it should have came out a lot sooner, but I hope this works out in Bonnie's favor. Anyway guys, that's all I've got for you today in this horror news update. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champane, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.